everyone, Swaim here, and I'm talking to Destin about GTA 6 and potentially what cities this newer, potentially smaller version of GTA might take place in. Hey, Destin.
Hey,
So what are you
Swaim.
thinking? And what have we heard that's substantive about GTA 6?
Okay, so here's what we know. GTA 3 was based in New York. They've also explored Miami, Florida. One of my personal favorites, Vice City, was Miami, Florida inspired. And then, GTA 5 was sort of a mishmash of Los Angeles and San Francisco. So was San Andreas, actually. San Andreas was inspired by Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. A lot of people on the internet started talking about new locations we could explore.
Exactly.
And one of the places I sort of liked was London. What would you think about revisiting London? London was used in GTA London 1969 and 1961, the old top-down perspective games, and it might be interesting to go back there.
Well, it would be especially interesting because obviously no mainline GTA game and no GTA game since those top-down ones has left the United States. And it got me wondering, which I hadn't thought about before, is there something, does Rockstar consider GTA uniquely American, or would that be the big next step, is to take it international? And I don't know if the international feel might take away something that's essential to the formula, honestly. So I would be interested in it. And I had also heard that there was talk about them trying to crack Tokyo, GTA Tokyo, at one point, but realizing that the city is not built for the kind of driving mechanics they like to implement. So I wonder if we're likely to see them ever leave the contiguous United States. Do you think that's actually a hurdle, or do you think they'll easily shift to Europe or wherever they want?
So for me personally, I think GTA is all about a comedy based on America. I think it should definitely take place in an American setting, but potentially visit locations like London, Tokyo, and some of the other locations that people have brought up, Vancouver, Austin, Texas. For me, I would love it if we revisited Miami. Specifically, Vice City was one of my favorite games. Ray Liotta did the voice in that game, and then they never worked together again. But I would love to see us go back there, see what's happened to that location, and then potentially go to the other big cities. We've been messing around in New York and the San Francisco, LA sort of humorous locations for so long. It would be sort of a breath of fresh air to have that sort of pastel colored Vice City, though modern Vice City might be much different than what it was like back in the PS2 era when we got the first game.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you talked about revisiting, because I also think, for example, Las Vegas, that's not tapped out. I would love to see GTA revisit Las Vegas, if not in 6, eventually. But I also honestly think if we were going to leave the United States, my top pick would be northern Mexico, because it would involve there are crime stories related to border issues. It would be monumentous when you finally crossed into US parts of the world map. And of course, the world map would then somewhat overlap with the world map of Red Dead Redemption. And I could see all kinds of Rockstar signature Easter eggs, like finding Arthur Morgan's skeleton, dead of tuberculosis, buried somewhere in the GTA 6 world map. And I think it would feel like a completely different world, of course, because you're talking a period piece versus modern day. So I think there's a lot of places to revisit, but I do want to talk about places they've never hit before also, because there are only so many notable cities of character in the United States, and they've gone around. One that occurred to me is Chicago, because it would be like returning to their roots. Chicago is sort of where traditional, which has become romanticized in Goodfellas, Godfather, organized crime was born and thrived. And I could see a story blossoming there.
What time period do you imagine that they would ever go back in time like they did with LA Noire? Or do you think GTA is specifically more of a modern take? Because with Chicago, most of that history happened a long time ago. And well, I don't know a lot about organized crime today, but maybe if they were to sort of explore Chicago today, it's going to look a lot different. And also Watch Dogs took place in Chicago. It was almost a one-to-one recreation of the city. So
That's
other
true.
games have explored that location.
You could hit up a Groundlings improv show as a mini game. Yeah, that's a fair point, and I do think it's uniquely modern day. I mean, when you look at GTA 5 and you have a clear, essentially Ryan Seacrest stand-in that's dunked on as part of the satire. Satire, very crucially, I think, to GTA keeps up to date. It would be odd if suddenly they were like, Al Capone is your contact for this mission. Even I believe Vice City is probably the furthest desynced in time they've gone, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's about as far as you want to go, is 20, 30 years.
Yeah, probably. I like that look back, because it was sort of like the fun. Everybody has the big old cell phones, and you have this huge, ridiculous mansion, lots of cocaine, of course, during that time period, and it being a Grand Theft Auto game. You brought up the idea of somewhere near the border, right? And I think there's a lot of cities that would lend really well to that. One in like Southern California, for example, would be really, really great. You can still have your GTA aesthetic of having a major city, and it's ripe for parody and satire with all the, current news topics and everything going on in politics. I could see them really, really leaning into that and being able to not only talk about the almost pretentious presentation that they do of the citizens of a game like GTA 5, but also some of the more controversial topics. Is that what you're
Rockstar, thinking? I believe so, because I feel like Rockstar is the one AAA company that would not shy away from, like, they would talk about ICE and detention camps, and they might do it in poor taste, but that's part of what Rockstar does. And
well, they
would be one of the only game companies to even go near border issues in modern times.
And they could probably do it in an interesting way. Time will tell what they're deciding to do. There's been a lot of conversations, even if GTA could work today, because of the current discourse, but they always find a way to make us all sort of laugh at ourselves in a fun way and not a nasty way. But some of the other cities that were discussed were like Vancouver, Canada. I think
I've heard that a lot.
I like the idea of that city. It's very like San Francisco, but the north version of San Francisco. Texas would be interesting. The only problem I see with those locations are the local dialects. Because you would be saying, I'm sorry all the time in Canada, and in Texas you'd be saying y'all all the time.
That makes me want one in the Northeast where everyone's like, oh, hello, you're robbing me. That's odd. The other one I want to mention before we run out of time is I recently got to take a trip before quarantine to New Orleans, and dang, that town has a lot of character. Again, there would be some accent in play, but I think New Orleans would be a ridiculously fun place to tool around with no consequences, like the tourists do anyway.
Yeah, if you think about Saint Denis in Red Dead Redemption 2, they kind of visited there, and Mafia 3 did a little bit with New Orleans, and they were quite successful. It's going to be really interesting to see where Grand Theft Auto goes next. I'd love to hear what the commenters think about location and where we could revisit. For me personally, I say stick with what you know and kind of start with one of the key cities that Grand Theft Auto is known and loved for. What about you, Swain?
And I think that'll be, my top pick? Honestly, New Orleans. It snuck in at the end, but I really think it's because I don't have any evidence to back it up, so it's not interesting conversation, but I'm like, that to me is self-evidently a big city where a lot of crime stories happen that has a ton of character that they haven't hit in GTA directly. You're right about Saint Denis, but I think modern New Orleans would feel completely different. But that'll do it for this conversation. Destin, thanks for joining us. Thank me for joining us. We're all just here in this virtual stream. We'll see you next time. Let us know what you thought in the comments and keep it locked to IGN.